All right. Hello, everybody. This is Lars Light from the Somm Journal, welcoming you on behalf of our publisher, Meredith May, publisher and editor-in-chief, Meredith May, the Somm Foundation and National Geographic to the second installment of our series, wine education series, Winery Close-Ups. Today's theme is aromatherapy, the lure of wine sensibility. So just so you know, you're in the right place. Today's session is going to be recorded. It'll be housed on Somm Journal's website as well as the Somm Foundation website. And we're also broadcasting right now on Facebook Live through the Somm Journal platform. So welcome, everybody. It's great to be here. We've got a great presentation lined up for you and some wonderful presenters, some very interesting aspects to look at. And of course, there's always a little bit of a bonus thrown in. So I'd like to introduce Lynn Fletcher from the Somm Foundation to talk to us a little bit about what we're offering as an incentive today. Good morning, Lynn.
Good morning, Lars. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So many thanks to the Somm Journal. You all have the opportunity to compete for a $400 scholarship as part of this session today. So by tomorrow evening, you'll receive an email prompt with the essay question, as well as full instructions on the word count and the deadlines and all of that. You will have until midnight next Monday, the 14th, to submit your essay, and we'll probably announce the winners by June 21st. So make sure you pay attention. You must be a qualified wine professional, which means you just need to be working in the wine industry in some capacity to compete in the scholarship competition. So both first and second place will receive a copy of the New Sotheby's Wine Encyclopedia as well. So enjoy. And I do want to say one other thing. We do have a grand prize coming up for the October session. And the best chance you have at competing and winning that grand prize scholarship is to attend all of the sessions. So we hope you'll join us for each and every one. So good luck, everyone.
Thanks, Lynn. We'd love to have everybody here. And I think part of the big incentive of this essay contest, first of all, I think $400 for 500 words is pretty good. I have to talk to Meredith about the rate that we get at the Somm Journal. But I think that also one of the great incentives, the first two winners get a copy of the New Sotheby's Wine Encyclopedia. This is a fantastic tome. I think just, you know, the generosity of the mailing alone of this book, it's pretty heavy. And it's packed with some great information. We're very proud to be partnering with National Geographic on that, and thrilled that a couple of you will have a chance to get a copy of that. So please don't hesitate to scribble some words, give us a nice essay. You've got plenty of time to do it. So think quantity over quality. I'm going to share my screen for a minute and just give you some of my thoughts that I've had on as I reflect on our theme today for wine sensibility. That's tough to say after I sampled some of the wines already. But we're playing a little bit on the theme of aromatherapy, which of course is a pseudoscience based on aromatic materials that the hope is that it improves psychological and physical well-being. I know that a good glass of an aromatic white wine can do that for me, but aromatherapy is often offered as a complementary therapy or as a form of alternative medicine. So again, in moderation, I think wine fits right in there. The aromas of wine, we're all familiar with the famous aroma wheel, but the aromas of wine are actually more diverse than its flavors. The human tongue, our taste receptors, are limited in what they can taste: sour, bitter, salty, sweet, and savory. But the olfactory, the nose, has a much broader sense of different aromas that are almost impossible to describe, but they touch on fruit, earth, leather, floral, herb, mineral, woodsy. I think to me, one of the most significant things is having an aroma memory. The smell of someplace that I've been, the smell of a winery. How do you describe it? You can't, but it conjures up some tremendous, powerful memories. And the term aroma can also be very different than what we say is bouquet, because bouquet generally refers to the smells arising from chemical reactions, from fermentation and aging. So the aromas are much more complex, much bigger bag of tricks for us. So with that, I'm going to get into something else that is, I'm going to introduce Greg Wagner, who has been working very diligently with the Somm Foundation. And I believe the winners will get some access to his wonderful Somm Geo, which is, I always like to call it a sort of Google Earth meets the wine world. So Greg is going to give us a little bit of an overview, and then kind of gradually, as we go through each of the presenters, Greg is going to zoom in on where they are located in the world to give us just a little bit of a hands-on. Pictures worth 1,000 words, and maps are even more powerful. So Greg, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Lars. It's great to be here and to really see so many great wineries represented. I hope you all had a chance to check out the Somm Geo Tour for this event. If you haven't, it's on the Somm Foundation website under virtual enrichment trips. And shortly after, I'll post a link to that so you can follow along if you'd like. And the tour for this is an example of a much larger platform. So the larger Somm Geo platform covers the whole world, has a lot of very, very in-depth wine theory, and over 100 high-res maps to print off. That's available for Somm Foundation donors, and you can check that out on the Somm Foundation website. Now let's go check out some vineyards. Today we are focusing on the aromatic white wines of the world, which really have a huge range of flavors. A lot of them coming from the grapes. You know, you can get these really intense fruit aromatics, you can get flowers, you can really get just a ton out of a great glass of white wine. We're gonna be going from the Willamette Valley of Oregon today with Utopia Vineyards. We are gonna go over to the Iberian Peninsula, where we have both Spain and Portugal. And then over to a focus on Italy. We'll go through Sardinia, Tuscany, and Lombardia. But let's kick it off in the Willamette Valley. So now, Willamette Valley, we're often thinking Pinot Noir, but the Chardonnay and Pinot Gris really does great here, which makes a lot of sense when you consider that Pinot Gris is essentially a mutation from Pinot Noir. And these wines, they have this texture and perfume and richness, but in the right producer's hands really stay lifted throughout. And we're gonna go see one such producer located in Ribbon Ridge. This is a small but special AVA. As you can see, this is really like the most concisely drawn AVA in the Willamette, focusing just on this one uniform ridge. And with that, I'm excited to hear about the wine. So back to Lars for more.
Great. Thank you, Greg. So with us, coming to us from Willamette, is Dan Warnsize, who is the founder, owner, and winemaker of Utopia. Dan grew up in the San Joaquin Valley, was a college athlete at Michigan State. He was a swimmer, and had a very successful career in technology, but the love of wine drew him to Oregon. So Dan, tell us a little bit about what really lured you up there, and you know, all the sensibilities, as it were.
All right. Well, thank you, Lars, and thank you, Greg, for that great intro. I was really inspired by the small vignerons in Burgundy. The folks that are farming organically, biodynamically, living on the land, doing things correctly, preserving the land for future generations, and then, you know, doing the actual farming and the making of the wine themselves, and integrating all that into a lifestyle while giving back to their communities. So that was really my inspiration. I was fortunate enough to come to the Willamette Valley in the mid-'80s and discover the wonderful Pinot Noirs they have here, as well as the Pinot Gris, and that gave me the first idea to want to come here and produce my own estate wine. So with that said, I could go into
Please,
now and talk a little bit more about what the presentation is about today. Let me get that to full screen.
Great.
Everybody seeing that now?
Yep, you just got to do that little trick up there with display settings again.
Okay.
Just click on display settings and swap.
Sorry, I'm not seeing. There we go.
Great, perfect.
It's a little covered up.
You're all set.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to step back just for a second and start talking a little bit before I get to the actual wine itself, talk a little bit about Oregon and the Willamette Valley and the Ribbon Ridge American Viticultural Area, and then we can drill down onto Utopia, the philosophy of the winemaking here, and a little bit about the Pinot Gris, which we're featuring today as my aromatic white wine. So let's get to that. So Willamette Valley, the very first Pinot Noir vine was planted in the Willamette Valley on February 26, 1965.
Wow.
And it took almost 20 years for us to be recognized by the federal government as a unique location and region for growing wine grapes or vinifera grapes. And that occurred when Willamette Valley was awarded the first American viticultural area in Oregon in 1983. Then in 1989, Joseph Drouhin came here from Burgundy and planted the first modern vines. Prior to that, most of what was planted, or all of what was planted in the Willamette Valley, were own-rooted vines. And when Joseph Drouhin came, he brought modern wine grape farming and really validated the Willamette Valley as a place in the New World for Pinot Noir plantings. Right around that same time, Pinot Gris was becoming the premier white wine grape of the Willamette Valley, and it has remained that way to this day. Currently, we have 9 nested sub-AVAs, including Ribbon Ridge in the Willamette Valley. So Ribbon Ridge, a few interesting facts about Ribbon Ridge. Ribbon Ridge is the smallest American viticultural area in Oregon, covering approximately 3,500 acres in total, with about 1,000 plantable acres. Currently, we have around 700 acres planted. We are uniformly Willow-Kinsey soil series, which is marine sedimentary. And when we get to the wines, I'll talk more about how the soils impact the aromas and flavors of our wines. But we're comprised mostly of sandstone, siltstone, mudstone, and then kind of wrapped in topsoil. We are protected from weather extremes by our surrounding geography. So on the west side, we have the coastal range, which provides a rain curtain for us and keeps us warm and dry, but very temperate during the long, cool growing season. And then on the east, we have the Cascades that protect us from the opposite effect of the hot, scorching easterly winds that come out of the Columbia Gorge. So that all results in a long, cool growing season ideal for Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Pinot Gris, and Riesling. And those are the main varieties here. So now let's talk a little bit about my favorite subject, which is Utopia Vineyard. I purchased this land as a horse pasture in 2000 and developed it from scratch. We now have 17 acres approximately of 12 different Pinot Noir clones and 3 Chardonnay clones and a little bit of Pinot Gris. We are nested in the Ribbon Ridge AVA, of course, and the vineyard itself is situated at 500 feet above sea level, which is ideal for this climate. And it's very gently sloped. The land is very uniform, which really helps us in uniformly ripening our fruit. And then the marine sedimentary soils are pretty consistent throughout the site. So let's talk a little bit about the wine that I'm featuring today. I don't know how well you can see that, but that is the Pinot Gris. It has a medium straw color. The wine, as far as its clarity, is very clear. So it looks well made. Toward the rim, I don't see any oxidation, which tells me it's a young wine, which of course it's a 2020, so it's a very young wine. Talking about just viewing the wine, the one other thing is the legs, and the legs are pretty thin and they run down the glass fairly quickly, which tells me this is a fairly low alcohol example of Pinot Gris. It's around 13%, maybe a little bit less. And then let's talk about the aromas and flavors. So I get a tremendous amount of citrus on this wine. So one of the things that really affected this wine was a little bit of a cooler growing season in 2020 and a little bit abbreviated. And so we picked at a fairly low Brix, around 20.5, and that gives it quite a bit of racy acidity. And then going back to our marine sedimentary soils, they're very finely textured. And as a result of that, it's difficult for the vines to extract water from those finely textured granules. And that results in a spicy characteristic in our wines. And it also, with the Pinot Noir, it results in more black and blue side of the fruit spectrum versus the more red where you get in the more clay-like soils. But with this wine, I get a tremendous amount of citrus. So lemon, key lime, a little white nectarine, racy acidity, as I mentioned. And then along the ridge, we have a whole bunch of wild geraniums growing. So in our Pinots and in our Pinot Gris, we get this floral scent from the terpenes, and more specifically the monoterpenes that are in aromatic white wines. And that gives us the geranium rose, a little orange blossom, and even a little hint of smokiness. I want to take a quick taste.
Dan, I think it's neat. You said you grow Riesling. I think it's neat that you decided to show the Pinot Gris in this aromatics webinar. We don't always think of Pinot Gris as being that aromatic, but obviously you got something special there.
Yeah, the Pinot Gris is our premier white wine grape. It has more than twice as much Chardonnay plantings currently in the Willamette Valley than with Pinot Gris. And Riesling is a very small percentage, maybe 1 or 2% of the plantings here. So growing, but a very small percentage. Being that Pinot Gris is our premier white wine grape and is considered an aromatic white wine, I chose to highlight it. And I really love the fresh flavors, and the racy acidity gives it the ability to work well with a whole range of foods. So anything from seafood to cheese and crackers or a light fruit plate. The acidity in the wine really lifts the flavors and brightens them quite a bit. So this is my favorite right now in terms of porch wine. So when we get warm, sunny summer days, a glass of this with a small cheese plate is my favorite repast during when we do get a break from farming and winemaking. But yeah, I'm even getting a little bit of a smoky hint on the finish of this wine. It's kind of a peatiness that's adding a little bit of complexity to it. This wine was produced in 100% stainless, so it never, because of the bricks being fairly low, I never touched it into any oak. So it fermented and aged in 100% stainless steel, and that highlights that citrus aspect of the wines. And so that's what you really get on both on the nose and on the palate as the first thing. But I even get, like I said, some of these floral, a hint of peatiness, and a whole range of little, very nuanced things like pineapple and stone fruit in there. But you have to look for it because it's very nuanced.
Yeah, it is very, very subtle. I think it's got a lot of nice savory notes. The aromatics are there, but they're not overwhelming. They're not a punch in the face. They're just a nice background melody. So very nice wine, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. I'm going to ask you to stop sharing. I know your mother told you never to do that, but we're going to have to do it anyway once in a while.
You raised me right.
Exactly. So we're going to travel across the Atlantic, as Greg mentioned to us. And Greg, where are we going to be heading?
So we are, across the Atlantic. We're heading to Portugal. And when you're talking Portuguese wine regions, so much of the climate of really every region in the country has to do with its proximity to the Atlantic. This is particularly true the further northwest you are. In northwestern Portugal, you have some of the cooler and rainier conditions that you'll see really in most any wine region around the world. And you can produce these really fresh and vibrant wines that we maybe most often associate with Vinho Verde, but also these like super aromatic varietal Alvarinho, particularly from the subzone of Monsale Malgaço. They're definitely really known for that there. And also roughly 10% of the production's red wine. These wines do really nicely with a variety of dishes. You can see just how like verdant and green the landscape is here. You know, they're often trained up in these unforsata styles, also called pergola. Due to the human conditions, it's cool up here, it's rainy. The resulting wines are really fresh, really vibrant, and really pretty. And I'm excited to hear more.
Fantastic. And to tell us more, we have Alexander LaPratte, Master Sommelier and Principal of Atrium Dumbo Restaurant in Brooklyn. Alex is he's a Detroit native and also went to Michigan State, Dan, so you guys can compare some
True
notes
story.
later. Alex has worked in some of the nation's top restaurants, just to name a few, in California, New York, French Laundry, DB Bistro Moderne, Le Bernardin, Jean Georges. In 2013, he opened his own place with some friends and partners. He's also in his spare time an adjunct professor for the International Culinary Center and is speaking to us today in his role as ambassador for Vino Verde. Alex, good to see you again, my friend, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about the great wines of Portugal. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Lars. Thanks for having me. Excited to kind of share this with everyone. So as a master sommelier and restaurateur, wine is my passion. I taste thousands of wines every year. When I'm evaluating wines, I'm looking for certain categories and kind of boxes I want to check. You know, everything from, is the wine in balance? Is it an exceptional value for its price point, whether that be, you know, something very low or very high end? Do I feel like it's offering a lot? I'm looking for something that's going to grab me off the beaten path, maybe something that's new that I can introduce to my guests. And then I always have to have an undeniable sense of place, that, you know, elusive terroir concept, you know, it can only be made there in these conditions and this soil type by these makers, you know. It's a romantic in me. And so it allows me to transport my guests and take them on a quick vacation just through a simple glass of wine, which I really enjoy. Now, when we're talking about aromatic whites, one region that I think should definitely be on everyone's radar is Vinho Verde, because all of those white varietals that they're making, not only has the quality improved dramatically since the last time I tasted Vinho Verde, and many improvements in the winemaking technology and the way that they're doing it, but all of those varietals are so aromatic, both with florals, but also with fruit characteristics. Now, I know we're talking about many different things, and Lars said to get a little bit geeky. So there's definitely terpenes in these, but isoprenoids and norisoprenoids and things like that. So these are things that you guys can check out later, or we could talk about afterwards. But I put together a few slides just to kind of introduce you to the region and go over some of the things that really excite me. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for you. All right. So if you are looking for a little bit of extra information, you do see at the top, we have Wines of Portugal. They have a fantastic site, and Vinho Verde as well. And that's one thing that I've always struggled with, the pronunciation. So at the very least, you will leave being able to pronounce it Vinho Verde. So that's the best Portuguese I've got for you today. Moving on to the next slide, we see on the left is this lovely map of Portugal with all of its topographical relief. And then on the right is kind of the subregions of the Vinho Verde DO. Now, you see 9 different subregions in the very top right, starting with Monção and Melgaço, following all the way down to Baião and Paiva. All right. As Greg mentioned, the proximity to the Atlantic Ocean is key. We're going to get those cool oceanside breezes blowing in. As you can see also, I mean, this is very similar to many areas like California, Chile, South Africa, Israel. I mean, we have this large body of water on the west, and we have east to west valleys running through with these rivers, which all of these subregions are taking their names from. So we're pushing those cool currents of air just right up through that. As you can see, in the lower green to the darker green is an elevation change. And you can see that a bit on the topographical map on the left, but it's more clear, I think, on the right, that as you move further inland, you're going to get higher in elevation. Which of course affects temperature, but also helps us a bit with the rain. We do receive a ton of rain in this part of Portugal. So Vinho Verde is a very rainy area, and like Greg said, many of these vines are being trained on trellis systems to keep them off the ground, to combat things like mold, mildew, pests, things like that. The two major rivers that kind of define the region, the Minho in the north, which is really the border between Spain and Portugal. And as you follow it further south, the Douro, which kind of caps the region at the end there. I want to talk a bit about the soil type, get a little bit geeky here for you as well, because we know we love soil as wine professionals. Most of the soil throughout the region is granite. Now, granite is composed of mostly quartz, but there's also mica and feldspar. Now, feldspar has a high amount of sodium, which gives it its pink color. So that's why you see so much pink granite. And you'll see granite throughout all these different wine regions around the world, Beaujolais, Crozes-Hermitage, Northern Rhone in general. But you see it a lot of places. But the reason why it works so well here in Vinho Verde is because as granite weathers, that feldspar and that mica start to break down and decompose, kind of creating a chemical change into almost a clay, and then it falls through the cracks of the quartz that is left on the top. So it's like shaking a cereal box, and all of the smaller flakes will fall to the bottom. But it's good because it allows great drainage on the top for the water, but that feldspar and that mica on the bottom that makes it clay kind of holds the water. So the vines aren't getting too much water, but when they reach deep enough, they're going to hit that denser soil, and they're going to have a bit more water retention there. So that's really, really nice for this area. Now, the temperature, it's a bit uneven with the rainfall happening mostly in winter and spring. Summer and fall are dry and warm. Hot, but it's a pretty temperate climate all around, so pretty even. All right, a little bit about the history. Vinho Verde was founded in 1908. It's Portugal's oldest demarcated regions. It's also one of the largest demarcated regions in Europe. So there's a lot of terroir differences, microclimates you can see right there. Monção and Melgaço in the northeast is kind of this little amphitheater separated by mountain ranges, but is going back, famous with the British, all the way back to the 14th century. They were starting to look here for wine alternatives to Burgundy. Most of the wines are very affordable, but there's a lot happening on the premium end, especially in particular with Alvarinho. Now, to talk a bit about these different grape varietals and their intense aromas. Now, Alvarinho finds its home in Melgaço and Mongaço because it is warmer there, it is drier, it does really, really well. And these are all indigenous varietals, which is another thing that really makes me want to champion Portugal because we're looking for something new, we're looking for something very authentic. But Alvarinho has an intense aroma, is a very complex varietal, both fruity and floral, with aromas of linden, orange, acacia blossom, all the way through lemongrass, honeysuckle, grapefruit, bergamot, peach, green apple. As it ages, these can change a bit, become a bit more oxidized, a little bit more dried out, hazelnut, honey. Now, Monção and Melgaço is where you're going to see most of the 100% Alvarinho, but moving forward, they're starting to adjust some of the laws, starting with next vintage. We're going to see some more 100% Alvarinho throughout all of Vinho Verde. Now, normally it's blended with two varietals, Luero here at the bottom, or Trechadura. Now, both of these are very aromatic as well. The Luero is a bit more focused, a little bit more freesia and rose. Apologize. A little bit more freesia and rose and jasmine, whereas the Trechadura adds a bit more body. As we move further south into like the Baião region, you're going to see more Avesso. Avesso reminds me of very much like a cool climate Chardonnay. So we can see some Chablis-esque things happening there. Orange, pineapple, a lot of melon, white peach. There's some nuttiness, some white floral as well, but it does extremely well there. Other things to think about when you're talking about these wines is some of the comparables around the world. When I'm looking for light, refreshing, mineral-driven wines, I'm thinking, comparatives of Gruner Veltliner, Chablis, Muscadet, Sancerre, even our friends in Rias Baixas, just to the north, which we're going to hear a bit more about. And if you were going to compare maybe the subregion of Monção and Melgaço to some of the regions in Rias Baixas, I'd be looking at Sotomayor, Condado do Té, and Ouro Sal, because that Minho River, The soil types are very similar on both sides, and you have a lot of the same kind of climate. As far as food, super friendly with many different types of food, everything from salads, because it's lower alcohol, higher acidity, really refreshing. I love it on summer days, but you can move into things that have more texture and weight, like roasted fish, grilled fish, chicken with some of the albarinos that have more power, more density. There are also many different techniques that they're using with the top producers. They're experimenting with wood, different types of lees contact, soil experiments throughout. They're doing more in the Lima Valley with Luero as well. So there's a lot of things happening right now, which are very exciting. A couple producers to check out if we're looking for just premium albarino from Monsanto Melgaço. I'd be looking at Quinta de Sualero or Anselmo Mendez. They're doing very, very, very high-end stuff, but across the board, the quality is really, really good, especially for what we're seeing imported here. We're also starting to see a bit more rosé coming in. I'm actually pouring a beautiful rosé at Atrium Dumbo, as well as some albarino, of course. But,
awesome.
Thank you.
I can't wait to stop in and try some, Alex.
Yeah, no, we'd love to have you. Thank you.
So have some Vinho Verde. Thank you. I appreciate that lesson. I can see why Culinary Center wants you there as an adjunct professor. You did an excellent presentation, and congratulations on resisting the urge to mention bacalhau 5 times, which is usually what you hear in a Portuguese wine presentation.
Absolutely.
But boy, oh boy, I mean, rivers, ocean influence, and granite. How can you not make an aromatic wine?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well done. Thank you very much. A note to everybody, if you have any questions for any of the individual presenters, you can throw that into the chat section, share it with us all, but the presenter can get back to you on that if you have a note about their own wines or how to get reservations at Atrium Dumbo. I don't know. But if you have a general question on aromatic wines that you'd like the whole panel to address, then you can throw that into Q&A. So we invite you to participate that way. But in the meantime, Greg, where are we going next?
So we are going just up to neighbors to the north, just over the border, which is the Minho River, to Spain. And this northwestern region of Spain, it's really different, just a world apart from the rest of Spain. Cooler, rainier, but also culturally, culinarily. I mean, the food's different, the viticulture is different, the dialect is even slightly different. If you ever have an opportunity to make it up there, I highly recommend it. It's a truly amazing area of Spain. Here in Rio Spicious, Albarino is a star, and I'm a huge fan of Albarino. These wines have this really awesome acidity, this textural component, and these really beautiful kind of like high-toned orange and floral notes to them. And having varietal Albarino is a relatively recent thing. I mean, it's not something that you would see 40 years ago. It wasn't heavily planted, and it's really seen a resurgence in recent years for the exact reasons that I mentioned. They're beautiful, they're overachievers. Here we have the 5 subzones, but in the Val de Saunas, we're gonna go to Paso de Orantes. This is really like the epicenter of the region, right? It has the most wineries, the most acreage planted, and was also the first and original sub-region. Also, you can see here really beautiful vineyards, really lush, really verdant. I really enjoy these wines and really like this producer. So back to Lars to hear more.
Fantastic. Thank you, Greg. So just when I thought I had enough time to tackle Vinho Verde, now I have to say the name Artur de Lanquesang. See if my French is any better than my Portuguese. Probably not. I apologize if I slaughtered that for you, Arturo, as I will call you.
Very good. That was amazing. Impressed.
Our export director from Marqués de Morieta. It's a long name, but it's a very important name. And if you are familiar with the Chateau Pichon Longueville Comtesse de Lalande, there I go destroying the French again. You certainly will know of this name. Arthur's family owned the chateau for many, many years. And he went on, stayed in the wine tradition, became a wine merchant in Hong Kong, started a wine club in Shanghai, studied in Paris, Lyon, Rome, Madrid. Now he's in London, multitasking in business development for auction houses and wine estates. So he's got a true international outlook. And without further ado, here is our Frenchman based in London to talk to us about Spanish wines. Arturo.
Thanks very much, Lars. Thanks also, Greg, for the introduction. And I'm so pleased to be here. I'm able to travel with you now. I'm in the US, and now I hope to take you together traveling to a beautiful Spain. So I've just prepared a small presentation also to first start with Spain in general, then go deeper into Riojas Baixas, go then to Pasabarantes. So let me share that with you. Please let me know if you see it well.
Yep, looks great.
Good. Let's start now. Okay, so just to start, before we want to have kind of general overview of Spain and a few reminders of the key things of this country. So as Lars mentioned, I'm not Spanish, I'm French, I'm from Bordeaux, and worse, I'm even from Paris also, so kind of strange mix. But all in all, what I really discovered along my youth, even before 21 years old, was the love for wine. And it's only later that I discovered the love for Spain and the huge diversity of the wines through education, tastings, and living also some time in Spain. I really discovered, and I was surprised to understand, the huge diversity of wines. In Spain, we have 90 denominations of origin. We have 2 DOCAs, which are Priorat, and the first one was La Rioja. And we got 2 main bodies of water that have got a huge influence. The Atlantic on the west, north, and the south and east, you have the Mediterranean Sea. So of course, with a much more influence of the Mediterranean Sea and a cooler one from the Atlantic. So today we're going to be going more to the north, and we'll be going to the green Spain. Someone put a comment about a green Spain, and that is actually really, really surprising to see that the perception of the people in Spain, even my being only a neighbor of Spain, but when I came to Spain, I was just expecting the warm weather, etc. And my first step into Vigo, close to Pasabarantes, was just surprising. I was coming from Madrid. It was about 30 degrees in Madrid, very warm as always. And I arrived and landed in Vigo, and then it was like freezing cold. It was 10, 15 degrees, pouring rain. I went out of the airplane. Everything is completely green, and a completely different environment. So let's go and visit this area of Spain in the northwest. So here we are. Just a note on the fact that Pasabarantes belongs to the same family as Marqués de Murrieta in Rioja, and it's a winery that's been in the family since 1511. Okay. So Riojas Baixas. Here we are in the DO that was created in 1988. So we're quite late if we compare some of the other DOs in the country were more around the 1920s, like 1925 for Rioja. In terms of size, it's also very small. We're talking about 4,000 hectares. So 4,000 hectares, 10,000 acres. That's about 8 times smaller than Champagne, and that's about 30 times smaller than Bordeaux. And the other specificity of the area is split in very, very small plots. So nearly 22,000 plots are dividing this region. That means they are called mini fondio, which is a small ownership, which means that many of the wine has been sold directly to negociants, to houses that will create their own wines, which is not the case of Pasabarantes because we've got our own vineyard of 12 hectares. So it's divided the region in 5 subzones, which you can see here in the map. So you see that, really close to Portugal. You saw Rosal, Condado do Té, more in the south, Sotomayor, which is the smallest one, just a bit north. And then you've got Valle dos Salnes and Ribera do Ula. Valle dos Salnes, this is where Pasabarantes is coming from. And you see it's completely surrounded by, that's kind of fjords, and it's completely surrounded by water. And it's the river coming to the sea and the sea coming to the land. So here we are in the middle of this Valle de Salnes. The Valle de Salnes is the oldest subzone in the area. It's one that's got a biggest concentration of producer. This is most historical, and this is where we are. But it's also the coolest and the wettest subzone due to being surrounded by the water. Cool temperature, we're talking about 55 degrees in average, okay? So let's get into the main thing, the main element that really influenced the aromas is the Atlantic influence. So we're next to the sea and next to the Rias in an area that is extremely wet, talking about 2,000 millimeters of rain, which is about 3 times what we have in Spain, just to give you an idea. It's mild, however, we have an important quantity of sun. So 2,200 hours of sun on average per year. Compared to that, Champagne is 2,100, Rioja is 2,800 roughly. So it gives you a bit of an idea. And then other very, very important thing is the salinity. When you taste the wine and we smell them, you've got always this kind of saline notes. And that is coming from the fact that all the time the wind is bringing more salt to the vineyard. It's getting a lot of influence in that. Now, in terms of the variation between a vintage and another, more recently, there's been limited effect by the fact that it's close to the sea, so it kind of balanced the difference between the vintages, but also the global warming. We've had a more even vintage in the past. However, we still have some differences, and some vintage are clearly cooler. That was the case, for example, 2014 and 9. Where the very warm one, which is one of the ones I have now, which is 2016, shows kind of a different aspect, and it got a strong influence on the style of the wine. In the soil, Alexander mentioned it because we've got a very similar soil type. So we've got granite and decomposed granite as the soil. So at the end, it's a sand. But the other key thing is that you have a high pH in the soils, which reduce slightly the acidity that you have in your wine. So they got an important influence in that. The roots don't go that deep. So we're talking about 50 centimeters for the main part of the roots, and then they go deeper into the granite bedrocks, into the smaller part of the small breaks that you have in the roots. But at the end, because of the damp area, it being very damp, we don't need so much water, and the soil got a very good drainage. And last but not least, the granite is also a warm soil, and that's very important for the Albarino, because the Albarino needs get a good maturity, and the fact of having this warm soil helps to reflect and reach the right maturity that we expect from the Albarino. Okay, so now this grape, we have a lot of doubts on its origin. We said it's been brought. We said initially it was brought by the Germans in 4th century, and then we thought it would be brought by the Cluny monks, so the Cistercian monks in the 12th century. But now we realized that most probably the grape was actually from Galician origin, north of Portugal and this area. So we're talking about autochthonous grape varieties. A lot of studies been led on pelography about that. So Albarino represent 96% of the grapes of the DO. So that's the main grape variety that's planted here. There's a small quantity of red grape varieties, but mostly red anyway. And it's one of the smallest white grape, so with a 6 skin, and that requires this long vegetative cycle, hence the importance for us of having the granite that reflects the sun. In terms of viticulture, everything is done in pergola at Paso Barrantes. So we're talking about 6 feet granite posts that we call parales, and those are extremely key because they help have the wind going through and avoid one of the most risky thing, which is the mildew. So the fact of being nearly 2 meters high avoids that. Okay. What we do everything by hand. Everything is hand harvested in small crates to ensure that we have a very good conditions between the time it's harvested to the time it goes into the vineyard. So those are this is the paso. Paso means palacio. So this is the house where we have the winery, and you can see all those granite pillars that are making sustaining the grapes. And here you can see the small crates, so 20 kilos. Crates that we have at Paso Barrantes, which are commonly used there. Now, in terms of the winemaking, so everything is stamped. We have very, very gentle pressing. We settle by flotation. And then we do a fermentation which is very slow and a very low temperature. We're talking about 50 degrees Fahrenheit temperature, and between 10 to 30 to 60 days of fermentation. They're very small, so we keep the aromas of the fruit as intact as possible. And at Paso Barrantes, we've got two wines. We've got Paso Barrantes, our classic, and then we've got La Comtesse, which is single vineyard. With Paso Barrantes, we use stainless steel only. So really, again, to keep the fruit, whereas we're using a 3,000 liters Allier food for La Comtesse. It's been a really, really long time for us that we've been trying to see how we can match the food and the oak with the grape to keep and preserve the right fruit. So we don't do any malolactic. And we have another thing that's very key in the winemaking is that we have 2 to 6 months lees contact to ensure the creaminess of the wine. So we don't do any batonnage. So there are our two queens, Maria Vargas, who's the head winemaker of Murrieta and Paso Barrantes, and Elena, who's specifically at Paso Barrantes. Here, just a few pictures. And here are the wines. So there are two wines, very important in terms of aromas. And the different elements that I mentioned before help us to keep the grape elements, the white flowers, the freshness, the purity of the grape.
I've got to ask you to wrap it up, though.
Yeah, and this is what brings the freshness and purity of the wine. And the last wine, La Comtesse, was a different, more complex and more intense wine with some help of the food. Here we are.
Fantastic. Beautiful packaging as well. Fantastic.
Thank you.
So, muchas gracias. Merci beaucoup. And thank you.
Avec plaisir.
All right. So, Greg, where are we heading next on our voyage perhaps across the Mediterranean?
Yes, so we are headed over to Sardinia, a region, an autonomous region really distinct from the rest of Italy. Vermentino is really well represented among the plantings here, and with good reason. The grape really seems to thrive. And on the southern side of the island, it's a hotspot for Carignano near Solcis, but also Vermentino does well in the sandy soils. You have the proximity to the Mediterranean that really helps out quite a bit. Here we have some of the single vineyard sites for Cantina Mesa and a couple of the Carignano as well. So over to the Cantina Mesa winery, we have another one of the Vermentino sites. And a lot of these vineyards are actually ungrafted root stocks that are all Albarello, aka Goblet, kind of head-trained vines that are all really old, all ungrafted in certain sections, of course, but definitely special to see. And I think it's always fun to find these producers that are making these really top-notch wines from regions that you don't see every day. And so I'm excited to check them out.
Fantastic. Thanks, Greg. Me too. And to help us check it out is Christina Sazama, who is with Santa Margherita, USA. Christina discovered wine while entertaining clients for working over a decade on Wall Street. She then worked for restaurants in Porter, a champagne house, and now she shares her passion as a wine educator for Santa Margherita, USA. And she's here to tell us about the very windy island of Sardinia and its impact on the aromatics of Vermentino. Hi, Christina.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. And yeah, Italy has such an incredible diversity of grapes. And one of my favorite Italian grapes is, of course, the very aromatic Vermentino grapes. So let me share my screen and let me know that that is all good. It's all good? It's all good.
All good.
All right, cool. So like the Albarino we were just talking about, we're gonna stay on that theme of seaside wines, but now we're obviously moving to the island of Sardinia, which is an island just off the west coast of Italy. And so we're gonna talk about Cantina Mesa's aromatic wines from the Vermentino grape. And so the first couple of slides, I wanted to just sort of tease out some of the aspects of terroir that help enhance that aromatic profile of the Vermentino here. So keep moving along, there it is. All right, so if you weren't paying attention, this is Sardinia. It is off of the west coast of Italy. And you can see here that Cantina Mesa is situated in that southwest corner of Sardinia. So this is still obviously part of Sardinia, but we're down here, we're actually closer to North Africa. We're about 130 miles south is North Africa, compared to Italy, which is 300 miles to the east. So closer to North Africa, and some of those climatic influences coming from North Africa is going to impact how the grapes are grown and how it expresses itself ultimately in the glass. And so this is definitely a Mediterranean wine. This is definitely a Mediterranean winery. That is actually the winery, and that is actually the Mediterranean Sea right there. And in fact, one of the vineyards that goes into the Junco wine is right there, situated in front of the winery. You know, we were just talking about the salinity from the Mediterranean Sea influencing the wine in the glass. Sort of getting ahead of myself. But so the island of Sardinia, there's a unique set of grapes here. Most widely planted is going to be the Cannonau for the red wines, the Cannonau being the same as Grenache. And for the white wines, this island leads with Vermentino. And Vermentino itself is an incredibly aromatic grape that is native to Italy. Sources put Vermentino is actually native to Piedmont, of all places, where they call it Favorita. And then we see Vermentino grown all over, sort of hugging the Mediterranean coastline. Obviously, Sardinia, they grow it in the French island of Corsica, just to the north of Sardinia. It's in the south of France under the name of Rol, and in Liguria, where they call it Pigato, and of course, Tuscany, which we're going to get another Tuscan example of Vermentino just coming up. But the one thing all these places have in common, with the exception of Piedmont, is that they are all looking at the Vermentino Sea. And it's really because the Vermentino grape does well in these warm and dry conditions. So with that, let's get into a little bit about the specific terroir here. And here's the soil map of Sardinia. And it's fair to say Sardinia is this huge outdoor museum of soil types. If you actually fly in the south there to Cagliari in the south and drive to Cantina Mesa following the coastline, it's gorgeous because there's not a lot of population density here, but also because you've got the Mediterranean Sea on one side of the road, and then these cliffs where you can really see the changes in the soil types as you're driving along. And I never realized that the soil diversity here in Sardinia is really right up there with the Alto Adige. I always heard a lot about the granite soils of Sardinia, and that's that pinkish area in the north. But there's a lot more soil expression going on here. And really, that is going to be part of the terroir because the soil types are going to influence the level of aromatic ripeness. But really, there's another more significant factor that I think are influencing the wines of Junco and Cantina Mesa in particular. And so here's more of a topographical map, and you can see there's a lot of mountains in Sardinia, and the mountains do help moderate some of that warmer Mediterranean temperature here. And Cantina Mesa, remember, is down here in the southwest corner. And if you look at this area, you see that there's like this little island that juts out and creates like a valley of water. This little valley here is called the Portofino Valley, and that formation can actually funnel some fairly strong winds in this area. So now I'm going to go a little bit closer. And so this is what I'm talking about. You can see the pin where Cantina Mesa's winery is, and all of the vineyards for Junco are in this area. In fact, the furthest one away is in Piscina. It's about 7 miles away from the winery. But you see that we're facing the Mediterranean Sea. You will notice the salty kick in the wines, in the finish of the wines in particular. But you know, it is warm, but those winds are going to be more of a terroir influence. I think we're allowed to geek out on wine here. So I think a lot of people on the seminar would remember the Mistral wind of Southern Rhone fame. It's called the Mestrale in Italian. And this part of Southwest Sardinia is actually sitting right in the path of the Mestrale. So that helps to moderate the warmer temperatures and reduce disease pressure. Mildew just doesn't have a chance to establish itself here. So in fact, Cantina Mesa does farm organically. But it's not just the Mestrale that we're talking about. In this part of Sardinia, it's actually an internationally known hotspot for kite surfing, if you're into that kind of thing. And so I did have the good fortune to visit the estate in 2019, and we made some videos of the winemaker while we were there. And I was freaking out because the wind was going nonstop. I looked down at my phone, and my weather app on my phone says that the winds were 24 miles an hour. And I commented on that, and the locals were like, yeah, that's no big deal. That's just the maestrale. It is a strong wind, but at least you're not here when the Sirocco is blowing. And like, wait, what? So remember that I said Sardinia is only about 130 miles off the coast of North Africa. So the Sirocco wind is way more harsh than the maestrale, though fortunately it's not constant. But basically the Sirocco is bringing a blast of hot, dry, dusty, sandy air from sort of the southeast. And so the locals were saying it's super annoying because their cars get caked in sand while they're at work, and it's no use washing it because it's just going to happen for several days at a time. And by strong wind, they said it can get up to about 60 miles an hour. Remember, carrying sand particles into this area. And so here is sort of a video loop of one of Cantina Mesa's vineyards, and that is the Mediterranean right there. But what I want you to notice is this is just an average day, and notice how much the vines are getting beaten up here. These are bush trained vines, partly because there's such little water in the growing season, but we do have a strong base of clay, so that helps to retain what little moisture that we have. But they're also bush trained because there's probably, you know, a trellis system would get totally knocked over here. And so we see this showing up in the glass in that this aromatic Vermentino grape that is grown in this very windy area gets thicker skins due to this constant battering by the winds. And remember, a lot of the aromatic compounds and precursors of a wine are from the skins of the grapes. So that's particularly important for these wines. And we did talk a little bit about Vermentino already, that it is the most widely planted grape, white grape on Sardinia. It does really well in hot and dry conditions. And then that general tasting note, really citrus, wild herb, and for Cantina Mesa Junco in particular, that's a saline, that salty kick on the finish. But basically, these are the kinds of wines that I think a lot of guests are looking for, and that's why I love working with this wine. You know, it's fresh, check. It's non-oaked, check. It's dry, it's fruity, it's all of those things. I think of Vermentino as an alternative to Sauvignon Blanc, without that pungency of green bell pepper. It's more of an herbal note here. And so really quickly, the winery has been around since 2004. It was founded by a native who was in Milan for most of his career as an advertising executive, and he came back here almost in retirement to start this winery to really celebrate the beauty of Sardinia and its local grapes. And another interesting factoid about this, I don't know if you include the winemaker in your definition of terroir, but the winemaker here for Cantina Mesa is from Trentino, the mountainous area in Northeast Italy. And for such a warm area, the wines across the board in Cantina Mesa are very fresh and very aromatically expressive. The Junco wine, this is that wine, like I said, thicker skin we were talking about. We actually ferment this white wine at more of a moderate temperature to get a little more of that textural quality in the wine. And then aromatically, you see on the picture, just this ripe mango, but then there's lemon zest and a little bit of a toasty almond. There's also like a fresh thyme and rosemary on here. And that's what I love about this wine is it is aromatic, but it's both powerful and refreshing at the same time, which I think is one of those things that a lot of guests are looking for. So, to just kind of sum it up, and actually Junco, the word Junco, refers to the reeds around the ponds of Sardinia. So you're kind of looking at Junco with Junco in this picture. And the labels as well, that is the designs on the Mesa labels are a reflection of a traditional Sardinian tapestry called pibiones. I probably screwed that up. But with all the sheep on Sardinia, there's a tradition of these tapestries that you can see all over the island even today as like wall art and blankets and rugs and stuff like that. But really, to get into Cantina Mesa, I love how Junco is this fragrant Vermentino that can offer, your guests that are something that is less well known in terms of grapes and place, but you're still in that familiar category of Italian wine.
I'm going to ask you to wrap it up too, Christine. We're at time.
Last 2 points. The Vermentino itself has an aromatic complexity, like I said, is an alternative to Sauvignon Blanc, but I think the Vermentino is more of an elegant expression. And then finally, Cantina Mesa, farmed organically because of the wind. So the wind having more impact than on just terroir. And I know that there's a lot of guests who are interested in learning more about stuff like this. So the winds just make it super easy to farm organically. And that's what I've got.
Fantastic. I remember I had the opportunity to speak with the winemaker, and coming from Trentino, I think the winds were driving him crazy. He said he can count on one hand the amount of days that there's no wind. So it's a never-present part there. But the wine is beautiful, and I think your artwork there was right on with the mango flavors. It's got beautiful tropical fruit, and that's what I love about Vermentino is that the three main places in Italy that it's grown, as you pointed out, to me, the three main are Tuscany, Sardinia, and Liguria, of course, all the coastal places. And they have very different expressions. That's one of the beauties of Italy and the Vermentino grape, but it's slightly different expressions with different terroirs. So Greg, as we cross the Tyrrhenian, where are we going next?
Yeah, as we keep our tour of Italy going, we're headed over to Tuscany. Of course, when you're talking about Tuscany, it has a lot of acclaim for Sangiovese, and obviously with great reason. But the Vermentino here is really showing itself as making some of the best white wines of the region. And, when you're talking Sangiovese, most of the best sites are really, you're talking inland, Chianti Classico as well as Brunello. They're, roughly equidistant from the coast. Vermentino, as we talked about, really loves those coastal conditions. So Bolgheri and Maremma Toscana are really becoming forefront in the conversation around Vermentino. They're definitely great locales for the grape. Unlike Bolgheri, this region was drained in the 1930s, which paved the way for viticulture. And here we have, this is the Castello Banfi. This is really the center for the viticultural work that Banfi does in Tuscany. Nella Pedicola, Vermentino, it's fermented this stainless steel, really cool, long fermentation to preserve these kind of fresh and exotic fruit characteristics. And I'm excited to do the Vermentino comparison.
Awesome. And to do that is another good friend of mine, Igor Marini, who's regional manager of Europe for Banfi. Igor grew up in Verona. He's worked in retail shops, restaurants, and as well as for a local estate in Verona. Now for Banfi, he looks after just a few places, the UK, Ireland, Scandinavia, the Baltics, the Emirates. But he found time to join us today to talk about La Pettegola and the Tuscan coast, and maybe a little bit beyond the Tuscan coast as well. What do you say, Igor?
So Lars, thanks for having me here today. It's so a big pleasure, of course. I need also to thank Christina because she introduced many of the topics about Vermentino. So I'll have more time to talk about mine, Vermentino, so La Pettegola. And let me share the screen with you. So in order to give you more information, here we are. So Banfi, as you already said, is in the middle of the Sangiovese land in Tuscany, and Tuscany is not that famous for white wines, actually, even if many of the wines from Tuscany originally, the most famous were actually white, like Vernaccia di San Gimignano, for instance. But Vermentino is now, as Christina said, very trendy and popular, getting very, very famous. And Banfi is the leader producer of Brunello di Montalcino, so apparently, we have nothing to do with that, but we try to experiment some new grape varieties in our territory and also, of course, in the Tuscan coast in the last 10 years with a huge success, especially of Vermentino, and La Pettegola is the expression and maybe the best white wine we are producing now and definitely the most successful. So La Pettegola is a name in Italian that is just trying to express a kind of a gossiper, chatty lady, the girl that knows everything about everyone in the little villages. But it's also the name of the little bird that maybe you can see is in the golden color in the label, because that bird, little bird, is living in the area, in the coastal area where we grow up the grapes of Vermentino. So what are the aromas coming from in Vermentino. Of course, we are mainly producing on the coast. Casalapi is the name of the place where we have some vineyards. Is very close to Maremma, but in the Livorno area, as well as Montalcino. Montalcino is definitely the, let's say, new trend for us to produce Vermentino that is definitely expressing huge potential compared with the coastal side. You know, Vermentino has an origin, apparently it's not certain, but from Portugal and Spain. Then he moved to south of France, to Liguria, Bigatos, to Piedmont, Favorita. And it seems like it was like a sailor. He couldn't stay far away from the sea. But actually we experiment some inland plantation, and definitely the blend with the coastal grape and the inland grapes definitely are giving us some fantastic blend and a huge balance in terms of aromas or body or fruitiness. So a great, let's say, combination and potential for different zones of production with huge quality results. So winemaking, of course, is very, very important, because the genetic equipment of Vermentino is to be very rich in primary aromas, so terpenes, like in our clones we use in Tuscany are very similar to white muscat. So sage is the first flavors come to my mind, which is definitely very, very rich in our La Pettegola. And thiols in post-fermentations aromas are expressing more fruitiness, definitely more, let's say, aromatics, herbs, aromas. And because of these, the winemaking of Vermentino needs to be very, very protective in terms of oxygen. So it's redox winemaking, trying to preserve the aromas and the fresh aromas of the grape variety. So we act usually 16, 13 degrees, which is very low. And of course, this is due to try to once again keep the aromas. But at the same time, we try to avoid any kind of pumping over, delestage, and any aeration in order to not, let's say, destroy the aromas with the oxygen. The style, of course, is very aromatic and Mediterranean, refreshing, and is always reminding the seaside. Despite we are growing up the grapes in inland. So, but the theme for today was about the therapy, the aroma therapy. So I'm trying by these pictures, of course, they are not the flavors you can smell in Vermentino, but they are immediately reminded to a kind of a fresh, very nice, easygoing aroma. And that's why the name, La Pettegola, because it's almost the same concept. So what is fixing and is coming out from the ID, the aroma profile of our La Pettegola Vermentino is definitely this kind of Mediterranean attitude. You immediately can smell is a wine coming from the sea. So these aromatic herbs, sage, rosemary, and thyme are typical. So it's a huge complexity to be a white wine, only stainless steel fermentation and no malolactic. So everything is coming from the combination of the soils and the grape varieties, and of course the winemaking. Fruit is mainly about white fruits, is pears, is pear, apricot, as well as a very, let's say, intense citrus zest, the grapefruit and cedro. Anyway, something orange blossom style, which is definitely reminding to Vermentino, and it's not far away from the style of the south of Sardinia, Vermentino. And indeed, the soil is giving us some very similar aromas to Sardinia, because the coastal side where the first Vermentino from Banfi were planted are actually in a place where Mistral is coming very strong and very, let's say, windy every afternoon. And this is incredibly avoiding any kind of heat strokes. So we have never problems with sun's overpowering exceeding of alcohol. So it's very well balanced, and compare with the limestone, chalk, and very gravy soil of the inland, this combination is balancing the wine, giving a very nice, let's say, flowery sensation. And apparently the fruit is coming from limestone and chalk and gravy, as I said, while the citrus zest, the orange blossom, the fresh aromas are coming from the sea. And that's why the typical signature of Vermentino. almond and honey. Honey is because it's our Vermentino is very, let's say, waxy and creamy texture. So that's because of the climate. It's always a very warm area with a lot of course, high temperatures in the summertime. So it's not, it's very typical to get a very oily, creamy, and full-bodied Vermentino. And almond and honey are usually the result of the very long after tasting, and that's typical of aromatic herbs to have such a kind of bitterness after tasting, after swallowing the wine. But once again, because of the therapy, so why is our Vermentino so successful? So it's now becoming, in just few years, the bestseller white wine from Banff. And there are so many studies. I got some researches on Google in these days just to be prepared for this webinar. And I just read on Harvard Institute that there's a big link between smells and aromas and, of course, and our state of mind, so our mood. And it seems like the hints and the scents that I described in our Vermentino are giving all of them very positive sensation while smelling the wine. And as you say, Lars, in the beginning, smell is the most, let's say, interesting part of the tasting. When you smell the wine, you got 80% of the satisfaction. Then, of course, mouth is just confirming and giving some more, let's say, instruction about the reading of the wine. But the most is the nose. So the scrubs and the Mediterranean, the sea is always reminding us to summer memories, which is, of course, absolutely positive. And it seems like the first 10 years of age of all of us are those in which we are fixing the smells and immediately create a kind of a heritage of our memories and feelings, just to individuate the good smells from the bad smells for whole life long. So this kind of aromatic herbs are not only helping our concentration, attention, and initiative, but also reminding to some very good old ancient memories that we have in our subconscious, and we can immediately get out of our mind when we smell a nice aromatic wine. So the fruit is processing of reward. So it's nice to get a reward by smelling apricot or pears or white ripened peach. So, and while the citruses, as the orange blossom, are more stimulating, exciting, they are very sexy. You can take decisions, they are antidepressants, so are very helping in your mood in terms of a kind of exciting style. So this is why, you know, the Italians are enjoying this wine in the aperitif, as an aperitif, and the success of this wine is coming of that part of the day, which is apparently very stupid, but in those 2 hours, 1.5 before having dinner, we are just creating socialization. We go out with friends. It's a kind of a reward for the whole day working. Once it was in the office, now it's a smart working from home. But anyway, it's a way to make ourselves grateful for what we've done by just smelling something fresh and relaxing. So flowers enhance the left frontal brain activity, which is always giving us some positive vibes. And almond, honey are comfort, are calm and serenity. So finally, Vermentino La Pettegola is always reminded to positive vibes. So this is what is making the wine so successful. So it's like, you know, a kind of a addictive sensation. The more you drink, the more you would drink. So that's why, once again, the aperitif is the place, the part of the day we are definitely selling this wine the most. And it's always, of course, very versatile with food. So it's great with tapas, Spanish Thai, but it's also great with any kind of food, fish, let's say seafoods, whatever it is, pasta, simple, easygoing, salad. So very Mediterranean style. And finally, these good vibes are also creating a kind of a happy mood. So it's like, you know, reminding to holidays, to friendships, to the way of, let's say, enjoying a nice summer with friends and trying to maybe going back slightly to normality, as we are hoping to do in a few weeks from now on. So in the end, the Vermentino success is definitely coming from the smells. So thank you for your attention, and I hope to come and try and experience Vermentino live from Tuscany or Sardinia as well.
Thank you, Igor.
Vilas.
Very nice. Having those two Vermentinos reminded me of the opera Tosca, where he sings about recondita armonia. He's painting a picture of his mistress, and he's also got his girlfriend that he's thinking about, and they're both beautiful, but in very different ways.
You should sing now.
Yeah, no, you don't want me to do that.
Better not to.
I haven't had enough Vermentino yet. But so now, Greg, we're going to stop crossing bodies of water, but we're going to head toward water. Where are we going next?
We are headed up to northern Italy, to the region of Lombardia. Definitely main region with Milan, one of the most important cities of Italy as a whole, and big population center up there. We have Cameo tucked into pretty close to the shores of Lake Garda. And Lake Garda plays a very important role in creating this mild climates of the wine regions that are close by. And then Lugana specifically focuses on white wines with the distinct Trebbiano di Lugana. This grape really excels here on the clay and limestone soils. The soils and most of the topography of Lugana, including Lake Garda, really owe quite a bit to the erosion of the glaciers following the last ice age. And the Trebbiano di Lugana here is hand harvested. It's fermented slow and cold to keep the kind of delicate aromatics. And these wines take on this really nice straw color with these really pretty green highlights. And excited to hear a little bit more about Lugana.
Absolutely. And now I have my easiest task of the day, which is not to introduce a new speaker, but to reintroduce somebody we've already heard from. Christina, please tell us a little bit about Camaiol, which is also in the Santa Margherita USA portfolio.
Absolutely. And so let me just share that screen. And so, yes, we are staying in Italy, and we're traveling north, and we're traveling east from Tuscany to Lombardy. And this is a photo you can kind of see of Camaiol's winery, and you do see Lake Garda there in the background. And that Lake Garda is going to have some influence on these wines, but maybe in a less obvious way that you think about. So I do love my topography map, so let's get into that. And so here we are. The arrow is pointing to the Lugana area, which is on the southern shores of Lake Garda, as we've said. And Lake Garda is the largest lake in Italy, and something like the third deepest, so swing out with your bad self. But you'll probably notice right away that the area on the southern shores here are relatively flat. There's actually some small hills in this area, but I think being a little bit more of a plain makes it the area pretty unique for Italian wine. So now let's get a little closer. And the dark yellow at the bottom there, that is the Lugana DOC. It actually straddles Lombardy, and a little bit is in the Veneto as well. But here you see that Lake Garda is bordered by the mountains. With the southern edge there on the plains, that's the Lugana DOC. So yes, the breezes from this very large lake is going to help moderate temperatures of this rather warm area. And when I say warm area, Lugana is actually on the same latitude as Portland, Oregon, but here in Lugana, there's actually a commercial industry of lemon trees. I don't know if there's a lot of citrus trees grown around Portland, but that kind of gives you a sense of how warm this particular area is. So yes, the lake generates the breezes, and then those sort of nearby mountains are protecting this area from the very cold air from much, much further north. But being on that plain there, that does help to explain our soils, and it has to do with glacier movements of the area. And so that influence in the soil is going to have an impact on the aromatic complexity of these wines that you're getting in the glass with the Maiolo. And so I love this transition because we're going back in history. So whatever, 100,000 to 250,000 years ago, back then there was a glacier that came down into this area. And you can imagine that this glacier helped to carve out Lake Garda, but the soils here are morainic. So that just means that it's a lot of sediments of rocks and soils that were transported via the glacier movements. And so here's more what it looks like today. After the glaciers retreated, we have a couple of small hills, a lot of pebbles, clay, and silt. But actually the boundaries of the Lugana area, you can see here, the Lugana itself was also underwater for quite a long time. So about 10,000 years ago, Lake Garda sort of stretched to cover that whole area with the blue dashed line. And so the glaciers did bring a lot of rather sort of muddy clay to the area. But I think you might know that limestone, one of the ways that limestone can be created is from shallow waters, because it's the sediments compacted by pressure over time. It's the sediments of marine life, shells and coral and all that kind of stuff. So that's exactly what we have here. And it's actually interesting because they're rather stratified layers of clay and limestone. And here is a photo of one of the Turbiana vineyards. And so you can kind of see it is very heavy clay, and you do see some limestone pebbles here. If we dig down a little bit, it'll start to turn a little bit whitish, and that'll be the limestone layer. And I think most wine geeks will talk about the soils, and so clay, generally speaking, brings the power to a wine, and the Maiolo Lugana is a pretty powerful aromatically. It really jumps from the glass. And then on the limestone side, people say that limestone brings freshness and an elegance to the wine. And so those layers of clay and limestone are influencing the aromatic profile of what we have going on in the glass. So this area of Lugana is an appellation for white wine only, made from that Trebbiano de Lugana, or it's also called Turbiana because Italy. So let's get into the grape a little bit. And so the story has changed a little bit over the years. It is called Turbiana or Trebbiano de Lugana. And historically, it was thought to be identical to the Verdicchio of the Marche, but more recent DNA evidence says that there is some genetic kinship between the two. But Turbiana is basically its own grape. And really more importantly is that aromatic expression given the clay and the limestone soils and the warmth of this area. It's basically, these wines do have sort of a warm Mediterranean ripeness, but a fresh mountainous structure, and really attractively perfumed. The winery itself was founded in 1967. But the farmhouses on the property date back to 1710, which you'll see on the cartouche on the bottle. And importantly, this was the first winery to receive a Tre Bicchieri from the Gambero Rosso, which is like Italy's wine rating publication. So very, very fresh. I like to say that that Turbiana is kind of like if you had like an unoaked Chardonnay and a zesty Italian Pinot Grigio, if they got together and had like a love child, that's basically the expression of the Turbiana grape. So that's also an easy way to suggest the wine to people not familiar with this area. It's familiar because it's Italian, but certainly exotic. And it does have a freshness. There is sort of a lakeside quality to it, but it also has enough body to make it a year-round wine. Very straightforward stainless steel, cool temperature fermentation, blocking mallow. But overall, I do love this wine because it's kind of niche for more, eclectic guests. But like I said, it's got like a smoothness and a tartness that I think would appeal to an even broader audience. You can totally geek out on the area and the grape, but it's also just an easy bistro style wine that more casual wine consumers gravitate to. So Camaiolo in general, this is a style of wine that has such a wide appeal. We're here talking about aromatic grapes, and this is exactly the kind of style I think a lot of, at least US consumers, are looking for. And it does go well, with, like I said, with a lot of different cuisines, especially those with that fresh emphasis. But then if you do want to geek out on the grapes, then yes, we're talking about a local grape that has something of an heirloom quality about it. I mean, we already know that people love Italian wines, but this is something special within that familiar category. And finally, I mentioned that Camaiolo has been making high quality wines for decades, being the first winery in Lugana to get a Tre Bicchieri award. So it does do consistently well year after year. And if you really, really, really want to geek out, you can go to santamargaritausa.com And in the trade resources section, we have like a whole staff training. It's like 12 pages, a whole staff training guide on the wines of Lake Garda, just to get people more comfortable with the area and all that. And so I think I'm on time this time. That's what I have prepared for that. And yeah, delicious.
Fantastic. That's delicious. I love the creamy texture of Lugana always. It's a really special wine. And I think so many of the wines we talked about today are, to a certain extent, and with no disrespect to any of them, they're sleepers. They're wines that people need to discover more. And I think that all of the presenters did a great job today of helping bring out the unique character of their aromatic wines. And, you know, especially now going into summer, we're all looking for a little bit of refreshment. And as Igor said, a little bit of relaxation. Not everybody gets to do this for work like we do. So it was a great pleasure. So I want to thank each and every one of the panelists. I want to thank Greg for bringing Sam Geo in to help sort of really bring things to life and hone things in. And of course, thank the Sam Foundation for the generosity. Don't forget to, hope you took some notes and you can get that nice essay going. You'll get notice within the next day or so. There's Lynn. Hey, you want to give us a little reminder, Lynn? Give everybody a little prod about what they've got to do and when they've got to do it.
Yeah, so you'll receive your essay prompt by tomorrow night. You'll have until Monday at midnight to submit it, and just participate. There's money out there for you. Okay.
Fantastic. Take advantage of it. So thank you guys very much. And we will see you on our next edition. Looking forward. I think our next talk is about phenols. And I'm going to do a quick check on my calendar to tell you that we're going to be back on July 13th. We're going to be talking about phenolics and color. So another interesting topic on wine. Thank you all very much from the Somm Journal, National Geographic, and the Somm Foundation. Have a great aromatic day, I hope.